Would it surprise you to know that the only candle makers in Castleton at the time also shared the surname Marrison? Funny that, isn't it? But you've got to remember this is the gate of hell. So once everyone was stood here with their tiny little expensive candles, there were actually rope makers hiding on the walls. If you follow my torchlight up there, you can see these black marks going all the way around. And what that was from this very strange mixture of tallow, which was pig fat, black powder from dynamite, and magnesium, all mixed together and turned into something that they called blue light, and shoved into cracks in the walls. So once everyone was stood here with their tiny little candles not being able to see anything, the rope makers set fire to that mixture. And it did two things. It would light up the great cave like a flare, the burning fires at the gates of hell. But it would also make a percussive blast that would go boom! Scare the absolute ever-loving stuff out of them. Because they all knew the devil was waiting in the shadow of the school. I'm going to turn these back on for free. They're nice. Your entry fee covered in one fell swoop, isn't it? And this next part of the cave is a little bit used to. We'd be going into the devil's own dining hall, where he would be waiting at his dining table. And if you listen very carefully, do you hear the frying pans frying? The oven fires crackling. I have a feeling you might be on the menu. And at the bottom of these stairs, you'd jump off my back. You'd be brought up here by the light of your candle. And you'd be fully expecting to see the devil himself, sat at his dining table, ready to eat your soul, because I told you that's what was going to happen. But before your light could reach that far, and probably to save on the special effects, you would suddenly be surrounded by choral music coming down from above. And stood up there on that balcony, there would be a choir. There was a choir of rope makers, so they probably weren't very good, but they were a choir nonetheless. Someone actually came down here in 1816 and he wrote about his trip. And he said the choir only added to the horror of the whole experience. So they definitely weren't very good, but they did their best. And they'd be all dressed in white with candles around their feet and their arms outstretched as angels of the Lord, sent down from heaven to protect the Victorians below, which of course would be enough to scare the devil off. So before you see him, he is gone from his table, he is down his staircase, he's back into the shadow and back into hell where he belongs. Never on the safe and protected. So of course, when angels save your life, you have to give thanks to them. And the best way to give true, honest to God, Christian thanks is to throw all the money you had left at them. They'd reach into their pockets, grab all the coins they could, hurl it against the rocks, and then they would clatter down into little sacks and baskets waiting below. They would then be collected by the kids later on. But imagine how it would have felt after 2 hours down here, believing you're about to be eaten. You now have the power of God at your back. You found my puppet. Yeah. It's a really good one, that one. Now come up to the barrier and look down. So here we stand atop the Devil's Staircase. We sadly have to stop our tours here and go back the way we came, because we'll find out why. It was far, far, far too dangerous to take people further at this point. The Victorians didn't care about that. They took people down here, down the Devil's Staircase. And around that corner, they'd get into a section called Five Arches, and at the end of Five Arches, they would reach a spot which was described as where the roof sinks the water. Oh, you want to know about the slide? Yeah, well, who remembers the Chronicles of Narnia?
Yeah.
The 90s. The much more low-budget one. Two kids and one Tom Baker slid down this slide to get into the Kingdom of Rock People, which was all filmed in the Great Cave. And then the BBC, being the BBC, left it behind, and now it's just used by the cavers that go down there. So that's what your TV license is paying for. Why have I not paid mine in 5 years? And Victorians would head down into Five Arches. End of Five Arches is where the roof meets the water. And then they would see that you can't go any further and they would come back. But also beyond where that end of Five Arches is, if you went through that bit and swum underneath, you would enter the rest of the cave system. And that light that I turned on down here, that is the last plugged in light you'll see for about 13 miles if you were to head that way. Or 21 kilometres if you prefer kilometres. It just keeps going. It's not one long straight line, it is a labyrinth of tunnels. Goes up, down, across, off into the hillside, climbing, swimming, crawling, all sorts of other horrible words down underground. If you were to head that way for approximately 2 hours, you would get to Speedwell Cavern, or the end of Speedwell Cavern. If you want to go the easy route to Speedwell, it's a 15-minute walk up the hill. Yeah. Time even before shining 5-star reviews about Charlie on Google and TripAdvisor. People used to like to carve their names into the walls of the places they went to say they'd been here, literally leaving their mark on things. But because we had so many visitors down here, in true Victorian fashion, they were all rude enough to carve over each other's names. So every now and then you can pick out a letter, or an initial, or this guy, Mart C. I think it's Mart. Is it Matt? Is it Mark? We just don't know. That's only from a couple of weeks ago. Please don't be like Mart. That is his real name. Because what he carved over there was one of the only visible dates that we had on our walls. So it's basically like carving into an antique. But there is a good one, still, right above our heads here. There it is. 252 years ago, Derbyshire was down here on a tour, much like you guys. He'd survived the coffin trip, survived the burning fires of hell, even survived the choir without his ears bleeding too much. We got to this point here and carved his name into the roof. We tried to do a little bit of research about Arse River. The only thing we could really find out about him is he was really tall. And that concludes our Victorian Barber tour. We're heading back the way we came in. So I'm going to tell you about the really exciting stuff now. I'm going to tell you about rocks. The reason we don't is because of this border in the rock here, which separates out a layer of limestone, which is our wall, and basalt, which is our roof. And basalt is essentially fossilised lava flow from an ancient volcano. And it sits on our cave, that layer, like a lid, a box. And water has a horrible time getting through it. So by the time it's squeezed through any tiny little cracks and then drip down from the ceiling, these are all we're left. These tiny little pathetic things up here. Or are they about? The thing that makes them interesting is the way this cave was formed. And for that we need to go back 11,250 years, give or take. And when the glaciers started melting at the end of the last ice age, it became great big underground rivers, which carved out tunnels all over the world, all over the northern hemisphere especially, and it's changing direction, heading down that way, and creating that tunnel out towards where the Great Cave is. And then eventually all of that water started to drain out, and that's when these started to be able to be formed, which dates them. These tiny little things up here started forming at least 5,000 years ago. At least. The pyramids in Giza were just being built 5,000 years ago. And woolly mammoths still walked on the earth. Also weird to think of those two things happening at the same time, isn't it? But we could all meet again in 5,000 years' time. It would still be just as unimpressive. When that raging underground river made its way into here, it met another river coming down. When those two rivers met, it became a world. Starting off only small at first, but then through erosion, it started to grow and grow and grow, until this whole space was carved out by rushing, swirling water and rock grinding into the soft limestone. We know it was completely full of water because the chimneys in the ceiling. You see all these little rounded bits in there? That's from the sheer amount of water pressure creating tiny little eddies and real up into the heart of that soft rock. And then, because water likes to take the path of least resistance, did eventually find a big spot. Just down there where the Victorian coffins used to come through. And that's why the tunnel we had to walk through to get into here is so much smaller than anything beyond it. It's because it was all of this water blasting its way through the rock like a giant pressure washer about 5,000 years ago, until it reached the entrance. Tomorrow. You're doing all right. I think it's basically a sack of wet ground. Now I'm taking you back 330 million years. And what you would be looking at here was a coral reef. Coral reef. At the bottom of a tropical lagoon, much closer to the equator and part of Pangaea, the supercontinent. That's how long ago I'm talking. And the reason we've got the largest naturally formed cave entrance in the whole of Britain is not because we were carved out by water like all the others, we were grown in. And every single rock that you look at, and all the walls, all have patterns on them. And that's the fossilised coral, much like the patterns above your head. How amazing is that? This is apparently related to grain coral, which still exists on the planet today. People even get it for their home aquariums and stuff. It's amazing that this is its ancient. And there's one above your heads. It's probably the largest singular piece fossil that you'll ever see, because the edge of it is now here we are, 330 million years later. But to give you context on just how long ago that is, you'd have to wait another 160 million years before you ever met a dinosaur. We are the tiniest blips in the history of existence, aren't we? So we might as well have fun. Now the last part of the tour is right back at the beginning. I'm going to show you that map on where we've been and where the cave goes. I'm also going to show you the pictures of what they found deep down there at the far end of the cave 26
minute experience. Still.
Luckily, they stumbled into it from the bottom. 26 years ago, New Year's Day, they were caving and stumbled into Titan. Madness. So Titan, to show you the scale of it, that's Blackpool Tower, that is the London Eye, and that is Titan all around it. Man on a rope, 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 man on a rope. It is huge. Nowadays, to get into Titan, you enter from a man-made tunnel at the top and go down instead of the way they went in from the bottom and started going up. And that tunnel is in a field that way somewhere. It's basically a giant manhole cover that you slide out the way and then you abseil down a vertical 58-metre drop into the earth. And you abseil again and then again. The reason you do it in 3 parts is because they don't make ropes long enough to do it in fewer. And that whole trip takes you about 40 minutes depending on how fast you want to go. And then when you get to the bottom, instead of scaling up Titan's steep, rocky, wet walls, you start walking. And you go from Titan down here, all the way back through our system, up to where we are in that corner there. And today I've taken you guys all the way down to about there. There's the Devil's Staircase, there's the 5 Arches, and there's where the Victorian tours ended. So that's all you've missed. And that's our 13 miles of cave passage beyond. 2.5 hours from there, that's Speedwell, the lead mine dug in a straight line and strip mined out. And the only reason you see anything on this map, bird's eye view of our cave, is because one of these psychopaths went there. Cavers, sorry. I always get that wrong. Literally just strapping head torches onto their heads and following water into the shadows and then measuring it. There's no GPS signal down there, there's definitely no ordnance survey map or anything like that. They would just have to squeeze through, measure it up and then draw it. They do have a sense of humour, as most nutcases do. That little blue line there is called colostomy crawl. It's a bit up here called a grand day out. Don't know if it because it looks like the moon or if they just really like Wallace and Gromit, I've no idea. But to give you some context on the size of this, because as we come to the end of our tour, I really do invite you to take as much time with this map as you would like to. That bit there is called the eye hole. To get through the eye hole, you squeeze in like this. You go up, you then go sideways, and then you come back out on your head, still squeezing through. To show you how thin the eye hole is there, that's where we had to duck down. It is tiny. So as you do take some time with this and look at all these teeny tiny little tunnels deep down there in the cold, wet dark, be really glad I only took you that far. Thank you very much, folks, for your time and attention. My name's been Charlie. I'm not going to sell you a candle, but I do have a tip basket over there if you want to pay for my bus home. But if you've got any more questions at all, I'm going to be just over by the gift shop. Happy to answer anything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
പുള്ളി ഞങ്ങളിപ്പോൾ ഇവിടുന്ന് ഇവിടെ വരെ ഇവിടെ വരെ വന്നുള്ളൂ. ഈ കേവ് ഇങ്ങനെ ഇത്രയും കിടക്കുകയാണ്. 13 മൈൽസ് നീളത്തിൽ കേവ് കിടക്കുകയാണ്.